Hello everyone, in this video I'll be showing you an Oathbreaker Paladin multi-class with the Death Domain Cleric in Baldur's Gate 3. This is actually a decent multi-class if we use some gear to tie it all together. This is mostly going to be a thematic build, however, but there's two ways we can start this. If you're later in the game, start as the Paladin. This is the way that we can get heavy armor proficiency. And if you're at the start of the game, playing with the Death Domain Cleric actually has a little bit of an easier start. This is due to the Death Domain giving us the Reaper, which allows us to use spells like Toll the Dead on 2 targets. And another nice thing is Toll the Dead is a wisdom save versus the Sacred Flames dexterity save, which doesn't always hit that well on early game goblins with their high dexterity stat. Now for the cantrip, I'd recommend going with Bone Chill for the Death Domain one, because then we can go ahead and select the Toll the Dead here normally, and we may as well just take the Bursting Sinew as well alongside Sacred Flame. This one is useful whenever you go against Shades in Act 2, as they're vulnerable to Radiant. Now the problem is this multi-class is multi-attribute dependent, so the good part here is Baldur's Gate 3 actually has some items that allows you to kind of reallocate your stats. Now, we could just go with this stat spread here, 14 Dexterity, 14 Constitution, 16 Wisdom, and 12 Charisma, as we don't actually really need Charisma. We're going to be smiting for the most part with the Charisma stat, or with our Paladin subclass, so Charisma is not super necessary because we get a lot of the same spells from the Cleric, which we can focus our spell casting on. However, if you do have the Dexterity Gauntlets, you can dump Dexterity and put those points in the Charisma and get that up to 14 and then have 16 Constitution. Or if you get the Constitution Amulet, you can also dump your Constitution. So there's a couple ways that you can reallocate these, but this stat spread works well. At level 2, the Death Domain Cleric gets the Touch of Death, which is actually kind of useful because this will add additional damage to our melee attacks. Early game, Inflict Wounds is going to be the spell that can apply that, in addition if you want to do a melee attack, but later on we can also Smite. So for the spells we'll be selecting here at level 1, I would recommend going with the command spell. Having Sanctuary is not bad too. Guiding Bolt for any targets that are weak to Radiant, bonus action, Healing Word, command, Inflict Wounds, Sanctuary. Bless is another good choice too if you don't want to go with Sanctuary, and that'll be what we take for level 2. Into level 3 we get the Ray of Enfeeblement and Blindness, and we also get access to level 2 spells, which has some really good ones here with Hold Person and the Spiritual Weapon, which can be used to distract the enemies with, so that's pretty fun to have. At level 4 we get ourselves another cantrip, so we can take Guidance there or produce Flame. And for the prepared spell, I'd recommend taking either Aid as a decent choice or going back and taking Bless. And for the ability score improvement, there's a couple ways we can go about this. A bump up to our Wisdom. We can go with the Alert feat for a +5 to our Initiative. The Savage Attacker if we want to reroll our damage die so we have higher damage whenever we go around smiting people later on. But I think the best choice here is probably to go with the Wisdom increase as we do a bit of spell casting. And once we hit level 5 here, we get our Animate Dead, allowing us to summon undeads. And we get the Vampiric Touch cantrip or spell, which allows us to regain our health. It's not going to be very effective, so I'd recommend actually at level 5 to save our level 3 spell slots for Spirit Guardians. There's a necrotic version as well, and once we hit next level, we can ignore resistances. Very useful. And we can also take the Mass Healing Word spell here as well, because if you have any gear that applies bonuses to them, the targets like the Whispering Promise, you can get an Act 1 from Volo. You can apply Bless to your whole team now. I also think that Glyph of Warding is a pretty useful spell to take here, but the big one being obviously Spirit Guardians. Once we make it to level 6, this is when we get the Inescapable Destruction. The spells we cast ignore resistance to necrotic damage. It's pretty good. Then we can go ahead here and take Bless again. This is when we're going to add in the multi-class. So at this point, you can get the Blade spell, which is pretty decent as it ignores resistance, but here we're going to add in the Paladin. Now, I am using a mod to allow myself to take the Oathbreaker here. This is the Selenite Paladin Oathbreaker mod by Randa Ruda and Selenite Paladin. Allow me to just select this. Also, another shout out for a cool mod, the Unholy Smite Empowering Oathbreakers by Graphic Fade here, who has also made the Fade's equipment distribution. You may have used this if you've used mods before. This gives you a necrotic damage smite, so it fits perfectly thematically here. So we'll go with the Oathbreaker, which at level 1 gives the Spiteful Suffering. You apply advantage on all attack rolls against this target, and then on top of that, they also take 4 to 7 necrotic damage, and it also ignores resistances. So a little bit of a tie-in there with our Death Domain Cleric. Into level 2, we get our Smites, so obviously this is pretty fun. And then we also get to choose a Fighting Style. I would recommend Defense. This is going to give us a +1 armor class. More survivability makes a lot of sense here. You can go dueling with the shield. We can use a or if you really want to use a 2-weapon fighting, go with either of those there, but I think defense is the best choice. Now for the spells, again, we're not going to be using them too much, and the smites actually don't end up using our spell casting that much, so that's not a big deal there. We can go with Shield of Faith and apply a buff to ourselves, and even like Bless is a choice, Heroism, if you didn't take the Bless from other Cleric subclass. Now, once we get to level 3, we get our Oath spells that inflict wounds, but Hellish Rebuke is a pretty fun spell to have there, so you can give additional fire damage on an attacker. We have the Dreadful Aspect, which can frighten nearby targets, and Control Undead with the Control Undead spell. So this does use your Charisma, so it's a little bit risky to use, as we don't have a high Charisma unless you would have dumped one of your stats, which I did, the Constitution, and then put it into Charisma. We get Divine Health as well. We also get to choose another spell here. Nothing really super useful. Divine Favor can work as well for extra radiant damage. At level 4, we get our, let's take another spell there. And we can take the Alert feat, or as I mentioned, you can go down and take the either Warcaster is actually a good choice for holding your concentrations on Spirit Guardians, and also I think that a good choice is the Savage Attacker feat for rerolling damage die. But you can also go with an increase to our Wisdom there, or an increase of Dexterity if you wanted to. Really, the choice is yours. Alert's another decent choice there for the +5 to initiative, though, as if you want to go first. I'm just going to go with the increase to Wisdom to show what it does for spell casting in terms of the combat section. At level 5, we get the Darkness spell, which is nice to have, and the Crown of Madness. You also get protection from poison, magic. You get, level 2 spells there, so you can take the Branding Smite there, which can prevent the target from turning invisible, and Aid, since we didn't take it else from the other subclass, and it doesn't actually make a huge difference because it doesn't use our spell casting. And for the final level, I actually think it's best. Yeah, you can get the +3 your Charisma modifier to saving throws, but this is where it all comes together. We're gonna add in the Warlock, the new hexblade, because this gives us shield, so we got a lot of spell slots we can use this on. Increasing armor class by 5 gives us a lot of defense. We also get a lot of offense because with specific gear we can smite and booming blade on our attacks and power up our spell casting using the gloves of the battle mage's power, which procs on booming blades or smites. So again, that's why I said patch 8, it fixed the gloves of battle mage's power, which will fix this build. I know some people don't like the hexblade, but just a single level dip makes this chef's kiss perfect, because this is a death cleric. Oathbreaker is another evil-ish subclass to add into the mix. And we also get to use our charisma for our attack rolls. You don't have to use that though if you don't want to, but I mean, if you're using a strength potion, that's going to make it better, but 16 charisma for that's not too shabby. Then also the Hexblade's Curse will apply with a bonus action, and this is great because if you already use your bonus action for spiritual weapon, you can now apply this on your next turn. And for the next spell, Hex can be an okay one if you want to be able to deal additional damage to the target, and you can always also cast it at level 1. Armor of Agathis being another really good spell because it will give a temporary health and cold damage to attackers, so that probably makes you the most defensive version possible. So for gear, you got the Arcane Diadem of Arcane Synergy here, which will give you your Charisma or Wisdom modifier added to your weapon attack whenever you inflict a condition, which is really nice. There's also the Ring of Arcane Synergy, which does the same thing. So for helmets, you can also go with the Circle of Bones, which will give a additional resistance to bludgeoning, slashing, and piercing damage to your Creed Undead, which you get from the Cleric. And another nice bonus is you can take a ability score improvement to take your Charisma up to 18, and then also use the Birthright to get it up even higher. We now have ours at 18 there, so it's a little bit better because that'll allow us to do a bit more with our packed weapon. I also got for Cloak Protection, but the Deathstalker Mantle is probably the best in slot. You have to be the Dark Urge to get that. Armor Persistence, better armor class than most other choices, since our dexterity is not that high. The Armor of Agility you see there, we lose 1 armor class, and the Armor Persistence does give us all incoming damage reduced by 2 and resistance and Blade Ward. However, if you also wanted to, Helldusk Armor fits pretty thematically, 28 armor class there. But yeah, you also can go with your best available heavy armor or medium. If you started as the Cleric, you don't get that armor proficiency, so you'd have to use the Helldusk Armor if you wanted heavy armor. So that's why I mentioned start as a Paladin if you want to get the heavy armor proficiency, start as Cleric if you're early game. But the Gloves of the Battle Mage's power, when you hit a target with a spell or cantrip that uses a weapon, so Smite and Booming Blade, yeah, both of these will apply the Arcane Acuity, which gives you additional hit chance on your spells up to a +10, which is huge. So normally our spells don't have a great hit chance, 17, it's not bad, and the Paladin has a 16, but this will get posted up to 27 and 26 respectively, which means we're very likely to hit our attacks. I also have the evasive shoes there, but you can also stack the boots of stormy clamor, which will also stack conditions if you get the helmet, the diadem of arcane synergy. Now I also got the amulet of greater health as mentioned, but you can also swap out and use the gloves of dexterity and the helmet of arcane acuity if you're in Act 2. Bringing arcane synergy, but we can also make great use of the Band of the Mystic Scoundrel because we got so many bonus actions like hold person and command that can utilize this. And it also gets boosted up because of our gloves of the Battle Mage's power. The Ring of Protection for better armor class, and then the Hellrider Longbow for +3 to initiative. And we also got Shard Spear of the Evening. If you're doing an evil playthrough, this is the best choice because this prevents you from being blinded. So we have the Darkness spell from the Oathbreaker we can now actually use without getting blinded ourselves. And then we also get advantage in saving throws while highly or heavily obscured and deal additional damage to them. And we get an attack that applies darkness as well. So that's the best in slot. Early game, Fowler Alu's a good choice. The Blade of Oppressed Souls not a bad option as well. Infernal Rapier if you're into Act 3. Knife of the Utter Mountain King, another good choice as well. You can even go with some staffs for spell casting early game, like the Morning Frost, which will give you the cold spell, which is just nice to have if you play as just the cleric. And then also Viconia's Walking Fortress. We also got the Hellrider Longbow for the +3 to initiative, and I'll show you what this looks like in terms of combat. So in terms of combat, we want to get our crowd control set up early. So we have Spiritual Weapon to pull attacks. If you have another caster that can put Cloud Kill in an area, you can actually draw them all into there. But since we don't have any other options for that, we got our sphere here, which also gives us a free spell that gives darkness. You can see here I have darkness on my hotbar from the race trait as playing as Drow, and then also the spell there from the weapon, and then also from the Oathbreaker Paladin. Darkness just fits this build perfectly, and we're going to start off here, which we can apply the Touch of Death, which if we're not able to take out the target, this is the best choice to go with because it'll deal additional damage to them. Now we have advantage on our attack, and we can use a Booming Blade as we didn't use our first action there. We used the Darkness attack, and that was enough to finish them off, so we don't have to use the Touch of Death. Now we got our spot set up here, so we can focus on taking care of high priority targets here, like this this mage here that we want to get rid of. So we can even use our bonus actions to shut them down too. So we do got level 4 spell slots, which is kind of nice to have. So our next attack, we can go ahead with stacking up some more arcane acuity there for better spell casting, so we do land our crowd control. So I'd recommend doing a divine smite on a target there to further stack that up. Boom, that gave us some extra damage, and that got our arcane acuity up. And then we'll use a booming blade to finally stack that up even higher. And we don't even have to use the Touch of Death, which is perfect. Then we'll go back to our little hidey hole there. And then what we can do is use a command spell that can be upcast, as the Band of Mystic Scoundrel allows us to do that. And then we can use this on a few different characters here, and make sure that you do select the correct save, that it's using wisdom for your spellcasting stat. You can see one has wisdom, one doesn't have that there. So we want to make sure that we're using the wisdom based one there. So let's use that 99% chance, 99% chance. Perfect. We landed our command. That's a pretty useful first turn. So since we use command, we now have them both lured into our darkness where we got advantage. So like a spider, we can strike them down. We can use a booming blade here to start off. This is again going to continue to increase our arcane acuity. This didn't take out the targets. We can use the Touch of Death, which forced them to die. So perfect. Now we want to take out this target here, the spellcaster with counter spell. We want them gone. So we got smites, and we can always upcast a smite to make sure that they go down. 21, 17, and 6. Perfect. That's exactly what we needed. And then we can focus on taking out other spellcasters. Those are always priority. Anyone that's got command or counter, any type of counter spell, command, hold person spell, definitely want to get them down first. So we'll go ahead with a booming blade, I guess, since we can use booming blade per action. I have haste applied from a character, and then we'll go with a smite there, which is just enough to secure the win. And then we'll go with another command. We could use hold person as well. Hold person is pretty strong too, so we could use that. And then we can always go with an upcasted version to hit 95%, 95%, 85%. And we'll hope that that one lands. Yeah, we landed 3 of them. Perfect. So that was a good way to spend our bonus action from the Band of Mystic Scoundrel, and we'll just camp out there. And since we have some held people here, we're just going to run up on them and start off as obviously with our booming blade setup, which will continually keep our arcane acuity fully stacked, which again, that brings our wisdom spell save DC up to 27. So hold person, they have to roll a 27 or 26 on our charisma based spells. So yeah, we're not missing when we cast anything. And then we can go around. We don't even always have to use a critical hit, because if we have hold person, they're going to be they're going to be critically hit no matter what, so we don't have to use our spells on our divine smites, that is. But we always want to be burning through booming blades as well, just because it's a free action that's going to continually keep giving us increased arcane acuity. Yeah, 22, 21, 23 there. And then to finish off, I guess we can just use a ranged weapon attack there. And yeah, that works as well. Didn't get a critical hit, but we can force one. So yeah, that's one of the nice things about being a Lithid, I guess. And then to finish off, we have one character left, and then we can use a command approach and just make them approach us with 95% hit chance. Boom, that worked. And they're just going to run towards us here, so that's an easy pickings for us. We can just run up. And as I mentioned, we do have an Unholy Smite too, which we can use. I'll show you what that looks like as well. But obviously Divine Smite being a really effective spell. So boom, there we go. Only did 12 damage, but it ignores resistance too because it counts as a spell, and the inescapable destruction from the Death Domain works on it. So that is a Death Domain Cleric multiclass with the Oathbreaker Paladin. It worked. Darkness obviously being a big crutch of this. If you don't have this ring or this staff or spear that gives you blindness immunity, there is the Steel Watcher helmet, which will also do the same thing, and also gives advantage on Constitution saving throw checks, which can be very nice. And there's also the Eversight ring that you can use. So yeah, let me know your thoughts in the comments. Hit the subscribe button below if you haven't already, and leave a comment for what build you'd like to see come next to Baldur's Gate 3's patch 8. I'll see you all in the next video. Have a great day.